evening, everyone. Shalom, shalom. Welcome to our Galei Zoom class, where we've been learning and studying Rabbi Yitzchak's book, Transforming Darkness into Light. So let's make a little l'chaim here. L'chaim, l'chaim. It's nice to see some people have their cameras on. It's much appreciated. It gives that human touch. Yes. Wonderful. Yes, thank you for waving. Much appreciated. Don't be shy. Oh, look, more people are putting on their cameras for that. I like it. Yes, it gives me energy and hope. Okay, so we'll do a teeny bit of review before we get on to the exciting new material. So we are in chapter 4, for those who like to look in the book. And we're speaking about the Baal Shem Tov's 3 stages of Hachna'ah. Very briefly, Hachna'ah is meditating on Hashem, meditating on Hashem's greatness, even just a couple of thoughts that Ein Od Milvado, that there's only Hashem, or the Baal Shem Tov's idea that's so important, the truth from the Baal Shem Tov that the world is coming into existence, recreated fresh, each moment. And I learned last week in my Galei Torah Sanefesh Tanya class that not only is Hashem bringing everything into existence each moment, but what we see is the word of Hashem bringing it into existence. Like it looks like a table, but it's the word of Hashem bringing it into existence. So those 2 thoughts in itself, that means I'm taking my ego out of the center and I'm thinking about God. That's Hachna'ah. Then last week we finished the idea of Havdalah of Hachna'ah, the separation. And the separation is meditating on Hashem with more detail, and at the same time feeling Hashem's presence and His Rahmanis, His compassion for us. And that's the only way that we can look at our shortcomings. That's the backdrop. And we don't even have to, so it's our shortcomings, but how we're looking at it is how we want to grow. So we look at how we want to grow in the backdrop of feeling Hashem's Rahmanis. And because we need to be honest with ourselves, we want to know, we need to verbalize, we need to talk about how we want to grow. So we spoke about that in more detail. And now we started a little bit of what starts on page 38, what's called sweetening within submission, heartfelt prayer. And so this is what we're going to be talking about. I'd like to finish this section today and see what we can get out of it and what life-changing lessons we can tease out of what it says here. All right, so here we go. So it starts, so after we have our list of our shortcomings / how we want to grow, we turn to our Creator in prayer, in davening. And we beseech Hashem to bring us close to Him. So this is the beginning. I had this chus, it was over 10 years ago. Rabbi Yitzchak gave a seminar in Prague about the Maharal, learning the path, Nativ HaTshuva, the path of Tshuva. It was Elul. And the Maharal says that Tshuva is simply turning to Hashem and saying, I want to do Tshuva, I want to get close to you. It's very simple words, we can all memorize it. I want to do Tshuva, I want to get close to you. So we turn to Hashem and we ask Him to help us come close to Him. And we did this last time, but anytime we feel distant from Hashem, it should remind us to turn to Hashem. I want to do Tshuva, I want to get close to you. So, and it should make us feel happy and confident that Hashem is going to be there for us. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. So this happiness in Hashem's closeness, Hashem's Rahmanis, we still understand the need for how we want to grow. And the more we feel, so top of page 39, the more we feel Hashem's concern in our lives, the more we are driven to live up to our innate potential. and not betray the divine image, the Tselem Elokim within us. So the Rebbe would always tell people, challenge yourself, challenge yourself. This is living up to, we have a lot of potential. We have a lot of potential, and we want to live up to that potential. So we're turning to Hashem. This is where we're turning to Hashem. And then we finished up last time by talking about this idea of bitterness, the Alter Rebbe's concept of bitterness, which he speaks about in chapter 31 of Tanya, that this bitterness has a vitality to it. The bitterness is what we can use to turn to Hashem. We can use that energy to turn to Hashem, to beseech Hashem, to say we want to get close to you. It's a bitterness that motivates us to pray. So this bitterness is very different, obviously, from depression. And it's very interesting. The second paragraph says, so bitterness is the middle path between the resignation of self-acceptance that absolves us from self-improvement. Like, I'm just going to be a lazy person my whole life. I've always been lazy, so I'm going to be lazy. So that's the resignation of self-acceptance. Nope, that's not the right answer. Or the depression that comes from despairing of ever bettering ourselves. And I thought that was a very interesting definition of depression. Depression is the despair of ever bettering ourselves. So we have to turn to Hashem and lift ourselves out from that point. So this is this bitterness. This is this holy bitterness that we can use to turn to Hashem. So that's as far as we got last time. So now we're starting this new fresh material that I was lucky to have the help of my teachers. I turned to Rav Moshe and Rav Effie because I really wanted to understand this well before our Farbringen tonight, before sharing it, all of us together. Okay, so the third paragraph down, it is given in Yiddishkeit, and when we are beset with problems, and that includes the problem of anxiety over life's difficulties, we should beseech Hashem to help us solve them. So this idea, it seems like a basic idea, turn to Hashem. When we have problems, turn to Hashem, but it's one of the things that we have to practice. We spoke about the idea, what we say comes from Chumash. We say it in Aleinu every time we daven. V'yadata hayom v'hashivosa el levavecha. That I know today. Hashem tells us, know today, and hashivosa al levavecha. Put it on your heart. But hashivosa has the sense of return. Go over it. Meditate on it. That we need to, these ideas, that when we turn to Hashem, when we have life's difficulties. Haven't we heard that before? But we have to actually meditate on it in order to actually do it, so that we do it, because it takes practice. It takes, yes, that makes sense, I want to do that, but we have to, hashivosa al levavecha, go over it. Turn to Hashem to help us solve our problems. Believe in His Rahmanis, that He can provide us with a solution. Now here's an interesting sentence. Whether through the inspiring words of Tehillim, or the Siddur, the prayer book, or through spontaneous, informal verbalization of our heart's desires, we always seek Hashem's benevolent involvement. So in other words, here's the option. We can say Tehillim, we can daven, or we can turn to Hashem with our own words. We can turn to Hashem with our own words. That is what we're going to call spontaneous prayer. So either of these to turn to Hashem's involvement. Now, it says here, footnote 20, for those lucky enough to have the book, page 162. I want to look at footnote 20 together. So it says, as we will explain later, pouring out our heart privately and verbally to Hashem, our loving and caring Father, is the explicit focus of the Hasidic path of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. This practice is most poignantly expressed in two verses in Tanakh. One is from Tehillim 102, which was part of today's Tehillim Kitas. So I was happy to see that, prepare that. I saw that before I said Tehillim. So this is the first line in Tehillim 102, a prayer of the poor man. When distraught, he pours out his supplication to Hashem. And then there's a quote from Eicha, pour out your hearts like water before Hashem. So this is what we're talking, this is the hamtaka within hachna'ah, the sweetening within submission. For the bitter waters of one's anxious psychological state become sweetened by pouring them out in emunah before Hashem. So this is the sweet, so this is what we're working towards. The sweetening, we're going to be speaking about this from a lot of different angles, but the sweetening is a state of consciousness. It's a state of consciousness where we can turn to Hashem and pour our souls out, pour our thoughts, share what we're really going through, because Hashem knows everything we've been through up till now. He understands us. So, it says the second verse alludes to this stage. For the bitter waters of one's anxiety, one's anxious psychological state become sweetened by pouring them out in emunah before Hashem. The sole appearance of the root to sweeten in the 5 books of Moshe is when Moshe sweetened the bitter waters. And we spoke about, for those who were here in the early classes, we spoke about healing from reliving trauma, and we spoke about what Reb Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk, the Alter Rebbe's senior colleague, who we spoke. He made Aliyah. His sefer is called Pri Haaretz, the fruit of the land, and he said about healing from reliving trauma in terms of the bitter waters. Like we know the story was the waters were bitter, and Moshe threw in a bitter tree, and the waters were sweetened. It's considered to be early homeopathy, sweetening, throwing in bitter to sweeten bitter. And we spoke about how this applied with healing from reliving trauma, because it is bitter. Reliving trauma, as we all know, is bitter. But since it's the trauma itself is not happening now, it's the reliving that's happening now, we can remember Hashem, that Hashem is with us. And if we can remember that Hashem is with us now, we can remember that Hashem was with us in the original trauma, which means that we weren't alone. You know, we were bringing about this earlier today, and someone said, but you know, why if Hashem was with me in the original trauma, why didn't He stop it from happening? And this is really, you know, and this question is a question that I guess everyone has asked at some point. But you know, because we spoke about how emunah is believing that Hashem is good, and we all have to grow in our emunah. It's hard. There's a lot of tests. You know, it's a paradox. Can we bear the paradox of, on the one hand, emunah is believing Hashem is good, and then there's, you know, difficult life situations which we haven't quite straightened out in our consciousness yet, and having to bear those too. But we want to grow in emunah. We want to grow in our emunah. We want Hashem is good. We have to believe Hashem. That's emunah. That's exactly what emunah is. It's believing that Hashem is good. So yes. So this idea is one of the ideas we're going to be working on as we learn more from this book. Okay, back to, now that we've done the footnote, back to page 39. We should never fall into the bottom paragraph. We should never fall into the trap of thinking that since Hashem is compassionate by nature, there's no need for us to pray. So that's, you know, we shouldn't. So we davening. This is called heartfelt prayer. There's no way to get out of the heartfelt prayer. And although it is certainly true that Hashem is compassionate and everything He does is for our good, He also wants us to acknowledge our powerlessness before Him and be aware that we can and we must turn to Him for everything. So again, it's Hashibosa ala bevecha. I have to turn to Him. Am I feeling distant from Him? I have to turn to Him. Am I tormenting myself? I have to turn to Him. We have to turn to Him. Like, you know, we can't, if we find ourselves, everyone goes, you know, for something, I hate myself. It's the ego loves that. The ego gets as much, you know, because it's all about me. I hate myself. It's doubly about me. Very cool. That's totally satisfying. But so this is, so we have to turn to Hashem when we find ourselves in these mental states. Hashem wants, this is Hashivosa al Habavechet. It takes meditation to remember it. If I feel distant from Hashem, daven, I want to do tshuva, I want to get close to you. It says, even if our suffering is an atonement for our wrongdoing or a rectification of a previous gilgul, the sentence can always be commuted through heartfelt prayer, or we can have we can daven for equanimity in dealing with our situation. This idea of equanimity, I guess it can also be called peace of mind. I mean, I, for one, when I was growing up, I never heard the term peace of mind. When I became frum and first heard peace of mind, I like, what does that mean exactly? Is this is this something that could fit into my life? Is this something that I could understand? Peace of mind. So in Hebrew, it's called menuchas hanefesh. And I remember when we had the schus when we lived in Crown Heights for 29 years. We had the schus of living next to the Groners. And I remember once I was writing to the Rebbe, and I asked Rabbi Groner if I could ask for menuchas hanefesh, and he said, yes, this is what Hasidim ask for. So peace of mind is something to daven for. It's something, it's an important ingredient, menuchas hanefesh, which is, but equanimity is a very interesting, in chapter 11 in Ageres HaKodesh, it speaks about yes and no are the same, equanimity. What level, when you think, it's something to work on. Can I really, it's a lifetime. It's a lifetime. Yes and no are the same. Equanimity. I want closeness with Hashem. That gives me equanimity. That gives me menuchas hanefesh. Okay. So, and then it says, the sages teach that the reasons that the avos and the imos didn't have children for so long was that it would inspire them to beseech Hashem on this account. They needed to pour out their hearts to Hashem and then thus build a relationship with Him. So davening is us building a relationship with Hashem. We want a relationship with Hashem. So we build it through davening. The section again is called heartfelt prayer. So we want to develop that. We all want to develop that. I mean, especially if we're already davening. Because if we're already davening, we may as well, right? Everyone's got that. Okay. So the bottom of page 40, and then we're going to get to the part, the really good part. Okay. By invoking Hashem's Rachmanis in prayer, we are admitting that certain things in life are just too big for us, and we do not hold the keys to our own salvation. In so doing, we finally neutralize the ego, and when the ego is neutralized, its anxieties are neutralized together with it. So let's go over this idea, because we've spoken about this. I need another l'chaim. Okay. So when we neutralize the ego, anxiety is neutralized. In other words, if we're feeling anxious, this is a time, there's a few things, everyone can immediately find something to feel anxious about. If we're feeling anxious, the way to neutralize it, to neutralize the anxiety, is not to attack the anxiety directly, oh, this is not such a big deal. The way to neutralize it is to lower the ego. In other words, we don't attack the anxiety straight on, but we do need this hachna'ah of lowering the ego, and automatically the anxieties are less. I mean, it makes sense. If we meditate on the greatness of Hashem, I'm thinking about Hashem rather than my ego being the center of my attention. So obviously my anxiety, it's like, it actually seems, of course, it's true. Okay. So heartfelt and humble prayer to Hashem, our private conversation with our Creator, is the sweetening stage of submission before Hashem. In other words, it's the state of consciousness that's a sweetening. It's sweetening. I'm turning to Hashem, my Father who loves me. I'm turning to Him. So this state of mind is the sweetening of the hachna'ah. The hachna'ah is lowering the ego. How do you sweeten it? Turn to Hashem. So there's a lot of thoughts. I'm going to read this one more paragraph, and then I'm going to share with you my notes from Rabbi Effie Ehrenberg and Rav Moshe Knut on this idea, because it's something that I felt it's really important for all of us to understand. So we shall see the simple act of articulating our problems aids in the process of healing, talking to Hashem about it. Furthermore, our reliance on Hashem's goodness and mercy assures us that our prayers will be answered. Okay, so let's talk about what this means. It means that prayer begins with tshuva, with vidoy. We're asking that our tshuva should be accepted. And this is something that I didn't quite get before. Like, this is how we start davening. We start davening in a state of tshuva. Our tshuva should be accepted. You know, when the vidoy, we can be, you know, the vidoy is ashamnu, it's admitting, we're taking responsibility. We're taking responsibility for our lives, and we're turning to Hashem in tshuva. And then we can ask him, please take care of everything. Okay, so we're going to be speaking more about all of this. Okay, so we're davening that Hashem should forgive us. So, and he will forgive us. This is the idea. The idea that what's guaranteed, the guaranteed answer to our davening is that Hashem will forgive us. This is why we know the idea in the Shemon Esrei, you can't make a bracha levatala, but we say that he's going to accept our tshuva. And this accepting of our tshuva is the prayer that's answered immediately. So this is such an important idea. This is how, so let's go through. I'm going to read this paragraph, and then I'm going to share with you my notes. So this assurance is in fact reflected in the davening. The central part of the Amid, of the Shemon Esrei, is a series of requests for specific spiritual and material needs, each request followed by a bracha praising Hashem for fulfilling it. Since Jewish law forbids uttering brachas in vain, this pattern implies that Hashem is ready to grant our requests whenever we sincerely pray that he do so, the request that our tshuva should be accepted. If it seems to us that all our prayers are not immediately answered, it's because we have fallen back into our old egotistical ways and blocked the channel before it has a chance. So, in other words, so this is the essential idea for beginning davening. Whereas we're starting davening in a state of tshuva, and Hashem accepts our tshuva. Hashem, that means a clean slate. We do vidoy, Hashem ashamnu, Hashem accepts it, and that's the sweetening. So this is what I want to talk about. This is really what this class is about, that we should be able to understand these ideas. Okay, so starting with hachna'ah. Hachna'ah is the relation of guilt is a word, responsibility is a word. I'm taking responsibility for my life, okay? And realizing the problem I think I'm suffering for is not the problem. My ego is the problem, not the objective circumstances. So let's talk about this for a moment. Okay, we all have circumstances. If you notice, we have circumstances, right? If you had to tell somebody, what are your circumstances? These circumstances, some of them are tough, some of them are causing us problems, are hashgacha pratis. In other words, circumstances are, Hashem has given us the circumstances. This is another part of our moon. Hashem is good, and Hashem has given us the circumstances. Now, our first thought before Hashivos Alavevecha is that the circumstances are my problem. I'm okay. The circumstances are a problem. But what we're learning here is the circumstances are hashgacha pratis from Hashem. The circumstances help me reach the realization that it's my ego that's the problem. The circumstances are a solution, that the solution that Hashem sent me. So we're going to talk about this because this is such an important idea. So the circumstances help me in my hachna'ah. These are the circumstances Hashem sent me. Some of them are very humbling. Let's use them to help us in our hachna'ah. I can use my circumstances to subdue my ego. My ego is my real problem. This is real Torah Nefesh. Okay. In chapter 29 of Tanya, we learn that circumstances are gvuros kadoshos, gevorot, kadoshot, holy severity. Sometimes they're tough. We all have tough. No, I don't know anyone that got away without tough circumstances. What can we do? I mean, that's what it is. Gevorot kadoshot. I think that's a nice way to call. I'm having a little gevorot kadoshot today. Oh dear, I better turn to Hashem. These gevorot kadoshot are wearing me down. Okay, they break my ego. The circumstances. So that's the healthy way to use the circumstances. We need to keep the ego down. That's mental health. Mental health, because my ego, as it says in chapter 30 of Tanya, the algebra says, feel humble before the lowest of below. If we feel humble before the lowest of below, that's a nice, safe, mentally healthy place to be, because we can't topple over. It's like being steady on the ground, very solid and balanced. So I can use my circumstances to break my ego. Now, but then you might want to ask, I certainly asked, so what about davening to change the circumstances? What about that? So we can pray for a change of circumstances, but without feeling like they're the problem. How do you like that idea? Without feeling like they're the problem. Pray for a change of circumstances, but to remember, it's my ego that's the problem. The circumstances are not the problem. How do you like that? Okay, could a few people put on their videos? I like that for that human touch. Let's get that human touch, just, yes, I appreciate, oh yes, another person, more people. Oh, I love it. Oh, this is good. Life is good. No, people, but they're even waving. It's good. It keeps me energized to share my these deep secrets with one and all. Okay, so again, this is stuff. All of the stuff here that we have to meditate on, starting with the hachna'ah, that it is only Hashem. All of these things take hashivos al v'vecha because they're counterintuitive. What do you mean there's only Hashem? I see all this stuff. What do you mean Hashem has Rahmanis? Let me give you a list of my circumstances. And then turning to Hashem in heartfelt prayer, we have to remember all of these things. In other words, take time, take meditation. It's stuff we have to remember to think about. Okay, so davening is that Hashem should forgive us. This is how we're starting davening. And this state of mind of feeling that Hashem forgives us is hachna'ah. Now, there's a footnote to check out chapter 11 in Ageres HaTeshuvah. So for those lucky people who are doing chitas, we're doing Ageres HaTeshuvah. We're not up to chapter 11 yet, but this is the footnote, because chapter 11 talks about how Hashem forgives us, even if we did this, because we slip. We say, I'm never going to do it again, and we do it again, and it happens again and again. But we have to keep on trying to do tshuva, because can be the point, that we don't actually do it again, or that distances before doing it become greater. But we have to turn to Hashem, because He will forgive us every time. The idea of saying I'm sorry, something I think I've shared before, but an idea from Torah Sanefesh is, if we're going to say I'm sorry to the mashal, saying I'm sorry to a friend, let's say we hurt somebody's feelings. So it's not a question of my thinking, this doesn't go along with my self-image being someone who hurts someone's feelings, so I'll say I'm sorry. Nope, wrong approach. The right approach is that I have to feel my friend's hurt. I have to feel the effect that my words had. Then I can say I'm sorry from a sincere place. So this is actually today's Tanya Chitas. When we transgress, it's like pulling Hashem's face into the toilet. So we're sorry, but we have to feel before saying I'm sorry. It's like feeling what we've done, pulling the Shekhinah down into the mud, feeling it. So then when we're doing tshuva, it's from a sincere place. I'm sorry I did that. It's not that, my self-image has been injured by my doing it, but I'm sorry that I did it. I'm sorry I caused pain to the Shekhinah. This is the idea. So this is the tshuva. We do tshuva and Hashem accepts it, and that's sweetening. Okay, more notes from my holy teachers here. So we spoke about seeing things as always good can be a challenge with our circumstances. It's the real test of emunah. It's testing my emunah. How much do I believe? I have to ask myself, we all have to ask ourselves, how much do I believe that whatever Hashem sends me is good? And then there's this idea of sweetening the harsh judgments at their core. Sweetening harsh judgments at their core. The Alter Rebbe believes we can do this, and it's why our souls came down into this world. So there's many levels of sweetening harsh judgments. First of all, we can be careful that we're not putting harsh judgments out into the world, that we're not contributing to harsh judgments. You know, they always say that, you know, you're asked, you know, what do you think happened to a guy that did this, but we were actually the ones who did it, etc. So let's just having that sense, I want to sweeten harsh judgments at their core. I want to sweeten harsh judgments. It's a good way to come into the world, and the Alter Rebbe feels we can do this, and it's why our souls came down here, is to sweeten harsh judgments. I think that sounds like a good shlichus in life, sweetening harsh judgments. Okay, so in davening, maintaining an awareness of Hashem's goodness. So it's even more than His presence, you know. I mean, of course, when we're davening, if we're already standing there, it seems like a good thing to remember Hashem's presence, but the emunah is also remembering Hashem's goodness. And even if it's hard, if we have a situation where it's very challenging for us to see Hashem's goodness, to at least maintain the paradox. Like, it's hard for me, but there's a place where I believe that everything Hashem does is for the good. We have to strengthen that side of the paradox. And I'm taking responsibility. We spoke about this last time. So taking responsibility for reality, and Rabbi Yitzchak actually prang about this last week. Taking responsibility for reality is a lot. It's a lot, but it's hopeful. It means that, because otherwise, if I'm a victim of reality, then I'm a hopeless victim. What can I do? But if I'm taking responsibility for reality, then there's hopes to sweeten it, to purify it. It means I can do something. And so taking that, you know, living that ashamnu. So, and again, we can pray for a change of circumstances without forgetting they're not the problem. My ego is the problem. And that's a very big thing. It actually reminds me, I think I've said this before, my teacher, Rabbi Effie, he occasionally does shalom bias counseling, and he describes how it works. First, he speaks to each spouse separately. He shows the husband how everything is 100% his fault. And then he speaks to the wife and shows her that everything is 100% her fault. And that's shalom bias. But he says it's hard to remember. Like, they forget. It's hard to remember, but you could understand how that could be shalom bias, right? Both people, because it's the opposite of what our natural state is, that it must be the other person's fault. Okay, so, and it's not even 50-50. It only works when I can take 100% responsibility for the situation, that the circumstances are not the problem. I'm the problem, which means my ego is the problem. So to pray for a change of circumstances while remembering that the circumstances are not the problem, but that Hashem can grant the change of circumstances in the light of my change of awareness. So it's a big change of awareness to go from thinking the circumstances are the problem to my ego being the problem. Okay, so, and then Rab Moshe was again encouraging me to read chapter 11, which is in Geras Tshuva, which is coming up soon in the Chitas. And again, the idea that forgiveness by Hashem is right away. Forgiveness by Hashem is right away, which is something we need to believe. Like, I do tshuva, Hashem forgives me. My soul is clean. what my ego will get back on there. And, it's the ego that keeps us from feeling it. We should feel the sweetening. This is something that, to know that it's available, to know that when we do tshuva, that sweetening in our davening, that our davening is tshuva and that sweetening is available. Just knowing it's available is a step forward. And again, Hashem has infinite forgiveness. So it says in chapter 11, that even if we did it again and again and again, a person is supposed to forgive. Certainly Hashem, who has infinite forgiveness, will forgive us. And this will lead to the joy of feeling this forgiveness. In other words, this is our heritage. This is our Yerusha. We can feel this. We can feel Hashem forgiving us, unless the ego blocks it. The block is coming from that good old ego, our problem. Okay, so admitting our shortcomings is all that is needed for tshuva. That's a good. What is tshuva? Admitting our shortcomings. So that's the vidoy. I think that's what the Rambam, very popular guy now that we're starting all over. So vidoy is tshuva, just admitting our shortcomings. Admitting our shortcomings is tshuva. Yes, all of these things are hashivosa alavevecha. All of these things are things that we really need to meditate on, because it's not so simple. So the part of davening, the part of prayer that is immediately responded to by Hashem is our vidoy, in the Shemona Esrei, and Hashem forgives immediately. So we have to slow down. The next Shemona Esrei, some people still have a chance to daven mincha, depending on what part of the world you're in. And we have to feel that when whatever the next Shemona Esrei that we daven, when we say that Hashem accepts our tshuva, that we have to feel that it's safe. It's not an illusion. It's safe to feel in our heart that Hashem accepts our tshuva and Hashem forgives us immediately. And this is the sweetening of hachna'ah. It's a state of consciousness. We need the hachna'ah. In other words, to do vidoy takes hachna'ah. To say it's my responsibility takes hachna'ah. So it takes hachna'ah, for the ego has to lower itself. I'm taking responsibility for the situation. I'm taking responsibility for my reality. I'm not a victim. Okay. And Effie said, guilt is realizing that the circumstances are not the problem. I'm the problem. The circumstances brought this realization, so they're part of the solution. And this idea of seeing the circumstances as part of the solution, this is to help me. The circumstances are to help me in the hachna'ah of my ego. Hashem gave us all carefully designed circumstances, otherwise known as hashgacha pratis. It's all exactly what I need. It could be the strangest things, and everyone has their own. And no one has it so easy, but it's all hand designed by the creator of the world, all of our different circumstances. In order to realize that the circumstances are not the problem, the ego is the problem. And the circumstances are part of the solution. And this is the sweetening. And Hashem forgives us immediately. That's the big bonus of vidoy. That's the big bonus of taking responsibility, is that Hashem forgives us immediately. And that's the sweetening. So that brings us to an end of chapter 4. We're going to be, so we can say something about, so chapter 4 was all about the 3 stages of hachna'ah. The 3 stages, the hachna'ah of hachna'ah. This is a quick review, because we're going to be moving on next week to a new chapter. And in 2 weeks by wonderful hashgacha pratis, Hey Av, that's Sunday in 2 weeks is Hey Av, the Arizal's Yahrzeit. For me, it'll be the first time in many, many years that I don't have the schus. So you never know how reality changes nowadays, to be by the caver of the Arizal in Svat. But instead we'll have a chance to bring together on Zoom. So we'll speak a little bit about the Arizal in 2 weeks on Hey Av, on his Yahrzeit. Next week we're going to continue in our studies of this wonderful book, and we'll be starting chapter 5, which speaks about Havdalah, separation, the 3 levels of separation. Separation is is objectivity. The major plus of separation is the objectivity that I could look at my problem from the outside, from the viewpoint of my divine soul. I could identify with my divine soul. That's a separation, because our normal state of consciousness since we were born is to identify with the animal soul. So to step out of it, identify with the divine soul, separation. And we'll learn the 3 stages. So that's where we're going to continue. Maybe I'll read one paragraph, because they say it's good to start, and then we have a few minutes before our next wonderful class with Rev Nir. But so the first paragraph here, to say we officially started chapter 5, is once we have reduced the immensity of the anxieties, and again we reduce the immensity of our anxieties by making the ego smaller. Anxieties, problems, or dark thoughts that plague us, by hachna'ah, by making them smaller and subduing our ego, we can proceed to the next phase of therapy, which could be called ignoring them. I guess there's a level of that. It's looking at our problems objectively, stepping outside, getting a more cosmic vision. So that's the next exciting chapter in our wonderful book. Highly recommended. And I'll tell you the truth, with this book, I get more out of it every time I read it. It took me quite a while to really understand what it was saying, to understand the words, and I guess that's the advantage of this wonderful Zoom class, that we're all gathered together to try to understand it. So